Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Alien Talk. I'm here with Ted and Nathaniel Gillis as our guest. Nathaniel is a demonologist. Um, First question, Nathaniel, how did you get involved in demonology, which I imagine is the study of
Mhm.
demons? I don't think it's something you can take a college course on, is it?
Unfortunately not, and that's one of the reasons why I haven't pursued academia. You would have to actually take get a degree in humanities or the liberal arts, then focus on that discipline. But um, the reason I got into demonology is because of my encounter in my youth. I moved into a haunted house, and the entity I met first appeared as a little girl. Right? A full-bodied apparition of a child around the same age I was at the time. And then once we moved into the house, that entity mutated as something that was much more malevolent. And so that was my very first encounter. Number one. Number two, it really was instrumental in me realizing that, listen, a lot of these beings will present themselves as love and light and then mutate as soon as you build trust with them. And that's what it was trying to do with me. And so that's what really got me into the field I'm in now, which is, again, for those who aren't familiar with me, is kind of comparing the modern UFO abduction phenomenon with what we in demonology would call demonic flights. That's what they were considered. And so that's really what I've been trying to do.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
what did this entity morph into as you got older? What did you finally see?
Everything, brother, everything. And it drove me crazy, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm losing my mind here. I'm a kid. I had no frame of reference. Um, but essentially, what would occur is I would go to bed at nighttime and I would wake up to a full-blown conversation occurring above my head. No idea what it was at the time, right? And so they're going back and forth. Other than that, crazy stuff, shadow figures that would kind of stare at me at nighttime, a looping nightmare where I would be induced into a dreamlike state, and then I would see someone commit suicide. You guys can edit that out, by the way, because I know I don't want to get you guys demonetized. But yeah, so
No, it's fine. We'll leave it in. We'll leave it in.
at that point, I would wake up and I could feel literally it was like something was feeding off of the fear that it was creating in me. And so those were the manifestations, but there was also, this is strange too, it was almost like a learning matrix being employed to where as I was evolving, it was evolving alongside of me. And so, like I said, that was instrumental in getting me into where I am right now in the field.
So, do you mean that this thing was like studying your responses to each manifestation?
100%. Yeah. And so I learned that it was like a kind of like a coping mechanism where I realized in no uncertain terms, wherever I went, it was going to be with me. I would have sleepovers. I was a kid at the time, so we're playing video games, just drinking Mountain Dew and eating Cheetos. We'd go to bed, and then suddenly I'd feel that malevolence enter into the house, and I could hear it displacing its weight on the stairs.
Mhm.
So that's when I was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this. And so I kind of designed a coping mechanism. Number one, I monitored my thoughts because a lot of times it would inspire just very, very dark emotions in me. And then it was almost like it would track them. Do you believe in this? Right? Do you
Right.
agree with this? And if you agreed with it, it was almost like it further empowered this intelligence. And so I started turning it off, right? Okay, yes, it's funny because when I mentor researchers now, I tell them you have to feel the fear without being afraid.
Mhm.
Which
Well,
it
they want to create different levels of emotional feelings in you so they can
Mhm.
siphon off all these different levels of energy there because they feed
Right,
them. They illuminate their
correct.
ships with that.
That's fascinating. I believe it, brother. I believe it because whenever I would get out of that nightmare, it was like something I could feel it, but I couldn't see it. It was almost like something was staring directly into my face.
does it
Terrifying.
does it
They,
feel
they
like it's
don't have a soul. They don't have a soul, so they can't create feelings for themselves. They're dead to that.
Mhm.
So they can in siphoning off that, I've seen them do it where they will, like addicts will maybe sniff glue or something, get
Hmm.
a few seconds of high. I have seen them actually take energy off of my fear and then
Right.
like kind of absorb it for just a few seconds. And
Absolutely.
I think they get some kind of feeling off from it, but that's the closest thing they get to true feeling that I've observed.
I agree. I agree. There is a serial killer pathology present in all of this, where the torture, the hurt, the pain, the emotional trauma is fed upon. I had one case about 3 or 4 years ago now where an individual was during COVID, and a family called me and said that their daughter was in the ICU. She was having abdominal issues, and essentially what happened was she had went to a college party and was assaulted by a man. And then about 3 weeks later, her nightmares began. And in these nightmares, she said she met an entity that looked like, appeared like, and smelled exactly like the man that had assaulted her. And so it was feeding on her trauma to the point where now, and you guys have heard of this, obviously, now her body was beginning to manifest symptoms of PTSD. And when they tracked it down through memory regression, that was the case.
That was
So
what it
there are
was.
being, yeah, so there are beings that will create literal situations just to step in to and to feed off of the fear.
Right. And sadly, so sad is our psychologists are so far behind, they have no idea how to deal
Right.
with when someone comes and reports they're seeing uh, creatures or ghosts or whatever that are manifesting to them.
Mhm.
Immediately, they want to uh, treat them as insane.
Of
And
course.
put them.
Of
And
course.
years ago, they put them all away.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sadly enough. Yeah, and so these case studies are perplexing. What grieves me more than anything, perhaps, is the access they have over our species. It makes me wonder. Basically what I've been trying to do as of late is to look at the behavioral patterns because I believe for sure that what today is being called are aliens were demons in biblical antiquity. It's the same behavioral patterns, the same methodologies. And I guess to my own demise within ufology, because they don't even want to consider that, right? They want it to be nuts and bolts and love and light. And what I've been able to do, thankfully, is kind of separate myself from that, I don't know, puppetry. And
Yeah.
to say, hey, listen, there are things here that are worth our attention and case studies that need to be understood.
So what prompted this change in what they were usually doing in the past? Okay. Like now
Mhm.
they're appearing as extraterrestrials, whereas before it
Oh,
was
it's very easy. Well, in times past, the behavioral pattern was to manifest as someone, a deceased loved one, a guide, or somebody that you would put your trust in. But the problem is in the research, and this is just from me personally, people were seeing through that mask. For instance, if it's Dear Aunt Edna, okay, what are you demonstrating that Dear Aunt Edna demonstrated in her life? And so at a certain point where Dear Aunt Edna would zig, the phenomenon would zag. And then the experiencer would say, wait a minute, that doesn't line up with the historical record of what I know to be true about the person you're presenting to be. And so essentially what they did is they created an entity which cannot be tested outside of manifestation.
oh, right.
It's almost like somebody stepping into a game, whereas in times past they would, okay, yeah, they'll possess a player with certain rules and characteristics. Well, now they've created their own.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But each they seem to be independent from each experiencer. For instance,
Mhm.
telling people that they come from Zeta Reticula or another
Right,
person, they might say they're interdimensional. And
right.
this the lies and the ufology. Is this where it comes from?
Yeah, and this is just obviously from my perspective. I think that one of the reasons it has been hyper evasive is because it's diversified its identity, right? Where research and experiences alike, we kind of compartmentalize this intelligence. Oh, that's aliens, that's ghosts, this is demons. And in truth, because of the behavioral patterns and how closely they are mirrored with each other, it appears to be an intelligence that's singular, that's been hiding behind these various masks.
Wow, wow. Um, okay, I have to ask you this, all right? You were doing an interview with someone I can't remember, okay? But you
I
were
probably
talking,
don't either. I'm just kidding.
but you were talking about a cup that had gone missing, but then later reappeared, but it wasn't the same cup. What
Yeah.
was the story behind that again?
That is Steve Marrow's work, and great. He's my hero in the field right now. But yes, that was essentially what happened. Was this phenomenon took a cup and then replaced it, and when they compared the cup that was taken to the cup that it was replaced with, it was different. There were molecular anomalies present, and that's Steve Marrow's case study.
Wow. And what, like, did they accidentally break the cup? Okay, just a scenario.
Mhm.
And then they were like, shit. So they went and replicated a new cup, but they use whatever molecules they use and whatever,
Yeah,
wherever they are. And that's why it was different. Or is it
perhaps,
deliberate?
perhaps. That's a good question. We don't know. I don't know. I'd have to ask Steve. That I don't know. I mean, that could be debated, either or, right? Is it intentional or not? That's hard to know. But the scientific community is coming around to the idea that whatever we're connected to, uh, even using the scientific method, is akin to sorcery or black magic. The Collins elite researchers from the Department of Defense, they were testing soil samples taken from authentic crop circles. They discovered a cellular anomaly and an energy signature. They went and experimented with incantations from dark magic, and when the phenomenon manifested, it manifested the same cellular anomalies and the same energy signature. So whatever we're dealing with, to my knowledge, it seems to be the overlords of the practitioners of antiquity who wanted to be worshipped. They wanted to be feared. They wanted to be obeyed. And it's not good.
Is magic real?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the real ones are absolutely. I mean, I had a case study where an individual was working with a guide or his guides, and he was going out of body and meeting with them. And it was like an abduction scenario. He's in the middle of a metallic room, metal flooring, metal walls, and his quote unquote guides are flanking him on the right and left sides. And when he left that abduction account, essentially, he came back into his body. What had occurred was, I'm going to preface that with this, what occurred was he realized these were not his guides at all. They were masquerade of angels as guides to him, right? I had to plug that in for you, buddy. um, yeah, but they
It's
were
heavy.
appearing as that. They were appearing as that. And then when he realized they were not at all who they appeared to be, they changed their appearance to something inhuman. That's when he slammed back into his body, and from underneath his skin to the surface, they had carved three amulets, one of which was an arching Egyptian hieroglyph. So since then, I've been able to take that photographic evidence and send them to every known practitioner I know, okay, of every major mystery school. And while they understand what, like in terms of why they were employing these amulets, it did not belong into their mystery school systems. What that means is, it's like it's almost like a different form of sorcery they're employing, which is exactly what the Collins elite discovered in their scientific methods.
When you say amulet, okay, carved onto them, are we talking about the marks that people come back from abductions?
Similar, very similar to that. Yeah, some of these were subdermal first. What the son told me, that when they were taking his shirt off because the father had a heart attack, that underneath the skin, they started out as red burns and then they manifested subdermally. Now, this is also demonstrated by individuals like Betty Luca and other experiencers, where when they're out of body and then when they're returned, there's something that occurs, skin anomalies that manifest from underneath the skin to the surface. So, what that implies is that whatever we're dealing with, it's almost like either it exists in the afterlife or it exists out of body, at least some cases. But yeah, so the amulets they were carving into the skin to the surface, they do not fit into any known model of mystery school traditions.
When you say amulet, okay, are we talking about
You
like
know,
some sort of trinket, like
one was either the Star of David or the pentagram.
yeah, like an image of
Mhm.
it?
Correct, absolutely.
Um,
from underneath the skin to the surface, which is mind-blowing to me.
yeah, someone sent us a photograph of their own marks that they got after an abduction event. And Ted, do you remember it was you brought up the Egyptian connection?
Yes.
You psychically saw that, but you didn't know what it was about. You just
Right.
reminded you of something
Right.
Egyptian.
It was a psychic feeling.
Yeah, this is
That's
very
awesome.
similar to what you're talking about now. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
That makes sense
It,
now.
right, but here's what concerns me the most about this is okay, again, I'm not a practitioner of the occult, by the way. I hope everybody knows that. I research it because I believe it has a profound connection to this intelligence. However, the way this intelligence organized and structured these amulets was completely alien to us. There was no reason. I mean, one was a Star of David, the other one was the cross, and then you have the arching Egyptian hieroglyph. And so, right then and there, that transcends the microcosm of demonology because it's it's interreligious and cross-traditional, which is it's crazy to think about. You will not have a Catholic priest employing the Star of David.
Yeah.
You will not have a Jewish rabbi employing the cross. In neither of those will obviously be employing an Egyptian hieroglyph. So my point being is if our practitioners are employing amulets in order to influence their world, what world are they influencing when they're employing different amulets during these experiences?
Yeah, yeah. And I assume these beings have left instructions to people throughout the ages of what
Correct.
to use when they're contacting them.
Oh my God, yeah. And that was one of my first, I guess, revelations in my own research was that when the altars of antiquity were built, you had a presence that was trying to become incarnate, trying to interact with us. And then you have the emergence of what they would consider to be idolatry. One of the ways they self-replicated was to carve the name of an unclean spirit onto a small piece of metal and then to implant that into a person's body.
Wow.
Ufology, yeah, ufology wants to take that for themselves and say, okay, this is just purely ufological. Nonsense. This came back again. These are the roots of demonology in antiquity.
Wow.
Well,
Um,
let me ask the question. Going back
Mhm,
to magical events,
mhm.
get real. Doesn't most of the things they've done contribute to highly advanced technology?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not all magic.
Mhm,
It appears magical to us because we don't
mhm.
understand them. We don't understand how it works. But
Perfect. Yep.
yeah, behind the scenes, I have seen uh, things that blew me away later when I went back in my right mind and thinking
Mhm,
about what I've witnessed. And when I say that there was no magic there at all, it was trickery
mhm.
with their
Yeah, the
technology.
correct. The phenomenon has a way of stage managing experiences in which our literature during these quote unquote demonic flights, depending on the tradition of the practitioner, the phenomenon would literally create this theater of the mind in a way where yeah, they would believe they were copulating with horns and hooves, demons, corpses. And then for a fleeting moment, the technology would fuzz in and out. And they're not on the backside of a hill or a mountain. It was
Mhm.
technology. They were being poked and prodded by metallic objects. That's when one of the first times I realized I pointed at that case study and I said, wait a minute. It's not either or, right? It's not either or. There's something here that's it's almost employing both at the same time. Now, with respect to technology, the Collins elite discovered a group of researchers within our government that were conjuring the phenomenon in order to gain access to secret technologies. That is concerning to me because they were quite literally leveraging our species.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I want technology, do this for me, and I'll do this for you. But I think what I'm after now more than anything else is what is their nature, right? Are they giving us technology merely because that's what we're wanting? And why is it that even though the incarnations of this intelligence are modern, the incantations they're responding to are ancient,
Yeah.
which would change the entire model for me.
Well, I see our government, I really think, in a short, simple way for me to say this, is I think our government sold us out a long time ago. Uh, we are a mass feeding program
Mhm.
for non-human entities that feed on human flesh and blood, etc. And we got some technology out of it, and
Right.
continue to this day to keep the masses in the dark so that we won't discover what's really going on because it might interrupt our ability to get more technology.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Well, thank you for agreeing with me on that. I have people that don't agree with me on that.
Well, if I may say this, there are those who are uninitiated. And that's this is to sugarcoat it. There are people that think they know, but they don't know. And that's fine. They have their own theories, but the fact remains, yes, there is a presence that has been coexisting with us. I believe, at least from the dawn of written history, it's been present. And there are puppets in the field that have been purchased. Their voices have been purchased. Now, and I learned this recently where entire conglomerates, companies, think tanks will purchase their voice but finance their research. So essentially, what occurs is in the contract that states, we'll finance your research, we'll buy all of your books, right? We'll fly you out to undisclosed locations as long as we are the ones that retain your data. And so for researchers, that's the best thing in the world, right? Hey, finance everything. And so what they're doing though is they're also buying these researchers as influencers. So when you hear people that say it's all love and light, you can't really trust them because you don't know if they're being told to say this by the people who are financing
Yeah.
their research.
Not only by that, but by the abductees themselves.
Oh my
Me
God, yeah.
yeah, me and Ted have continuous discussions with people. Uh, someone's perfectly acceptable with one of these entities being in their room doing God knows what late at night because that they think they're special because that's what they're being told them.
Right,
So
right.
you get a lot of it from the UFO community as well. All right, so what I'd like to do is just walk us through the abduction scenario, okay? The
Mhm,
first thing is selection, all right?
mhm.
One of the questions in abduction is why are some people taken and other people aren't, okay? And the answer is we don't know. There is no profile of the abductable person. Is that true,
Mhm.
Nathaniel? Is that what you found?
Well, it depends. I mean, if they're wanting to self-replicate through the womb, yeah, they will monitor the fertility. But it's a very good question because in antiquity, demonologists believed that the phenomenon was selecting their victims based upon the vitality of the man and the fertility of the woman, right? That's how they were sourcing their secretions and excretions. Betty Hill and Barney Hill. However, what demonologists realized is they were triangulating what was being harvested from the victims. They triangulated that with what was being employed in ritual magic. If the ritual incantation itself needed a certain substance, they would go out and triangulate it because that's where the phenomenon was taking it from the experiencers. So, in terms of their methodologies and victimologies, yes, it would depend on what they're sourcing. If they're wanting to self-replicate, they would pick obviously a female that's fertile. And obviously, Dr. Carla Turner had a case study like that where they had to actually take, the uterus, and boom, and then the phenomenon stopped. Now, I had a case study where that also took place, where it was a 55-year-old woman who managed a car dealership. She called me one day. We were exchanging emails and everything. But anyways, we got on the phone and she said, yes, they had been taking her since her youth, but she recently had a hysterectomy. And the beings manifested to her like they always did, began to run tests on her. And when they realized that they couldn't self-replicate, the phenomenon ended. So that speaks to me that at least some of the methodologies include, are they fertile or not?
Yeah, when you say self-replicate, okay, what do you mean?
Mhm.
Or what are they doing?
Well, okay, the one of the largest intersectionalities between the UFO abduction phenomenon and demonology is the hybridization program. And what has largely been ignored and even misunderstood by ufology is that number one, this is the same intelligence. Number two, if we include older case studies into this new phenomenon, then we would have more insight into what they're doing. So the case studies within demonology implies that what we're dealing with is the insemination of the woman with the fetus. Not only that, but placing their own consciousness in the fetus itself as a way of self-replicating their species. At first blush, what we had was the incubi encounters, where the succubus would go and harvest the seed from a woman and then appear to a woman in the image of a lover, a boyfriend, a husband, and then inseminate her with the fetus. That was the hardware part of the hybridization program. That was, okay, the missing fetus syndrome, right? However, in the 16th century, in a province called Safdi, it was in Israel, we started having cases where women were being induced into dreamlike states, encountering entities that took on the appearance of a lover or a husband or a boyfriend, and they would then consent. It's not really consent, obviously, but they would believe that's just a dream, or they would actually believe it is somebody they've been intimate with. But then the next day, they would be possessed by consciousness that was not theirs. And so this is fascinating to me. Then when they would present themselves to the physicians would ask them, okay, have you met an entity in your dreams? This happened also in Baghdad, where, you believed it was your husband or a lover. Yes, okay. And then they would go through these methodologies. Well, during this time in history, the pathology of this intelligence evolved to where it wasn't just consciousness that was in the woman, but they would also inseminate her with the fetus to the point where the physicians would document the women were pregnant. And then they would perform the Lavouche method, where it was pressing the thumb on the wrist. They would feel two heartbeats in one body, two pulses in one body. What's unique about these case studies, as opposed to the others that preceded them, is that simultaneously, when the phenomenon removed the consciousness inside the woman, they would also remove the fetus at the same time, leading them to believe, the observers and researchers, demonologists, to believe that these women were not just pregnant by the entity they met, but they were pregnant with it. And so that the entity had been trying to self-replicate through her. Now, this intersectionality, again, would be called occult transference, where the practitioner, when they're waning, when they're dying, they would go and they would inseminate a woman, put her in a deep dream state, create a fetus in her, and then commandeer that fetus as a new biological avatar. So it's just another, but that's essentially what I'm saying when it seems to be rather the self-replication of species.
So
I
they,
have a question.
yeah, go ahead, Ted. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it'll be misleading. Go ahead.
All
I'll
right.
I'll come back to mine.
Okay. So Nathaniel, they're getting these women pregnant, okay, with a fetus.
Mhm.
They're coming back usually in the third trimester, removing the fetus, and then they are inhabiting it.
Yes, we have that. We have that over even Betty Luca. Betty Luca was abducted, and she asked them, "Where are you getting these grays from?" And they told her, "These are the fetuses." So this
Oh,
over and over again, the self-replication of species. But what we're witnessing, though, is because of the diversification here, ufology says, okay, that's something completely different. And I'm coming up to the table and saying how and why.
yeah. Yeah. So the greys are actually unborn fetuses, essentially, mixed in with AI.
So yeah, not just AI, but consciousness,
This, the being's consciousness, whatever
the
they are.
being's consciousness. So check this out. One of the very first case studies we have in that is taken from the Apocryphon of John. It was a Coptic manuscript written and preserved by Egyptian monks. They talked about a specific sexual pathology of the phenomenon where, and this is what it says, that they appear to women in the images of their husbands. And then at the moment of conception and insemination, they stared into the eyes of the experiencer and then pulled the mask off. Now, the idea was, this is what's called an obstetric tradition. The idea was that whatever image the woman is staring at the moment of insemination, she will be impregnated with the material body of that image.
Yeah. And that's something very we're
Very
hearing.
strange.
Yeah, but we are that is what we are hearing in Duchess scenario is what David Jacobs calls eye scans. It's where they get
Correct.
real close to the abductee's face and just stares at them. Um, wow, wow. Now me and Ted in our group, okay, we've had some serious discussions about hybrids.
Mhm,
Ted is of the but Ted doesn't see a use for the hybrids.
mhm.
People think that there's, half human, half aliens walking around out there, eventually going to take over
Not
this
in that
planet.
sense.
Yeah,
Well,
so
I don't know about that. I know that's it's been hypothesized by David Jacobs, and I've even talked to people from MUFON where, yeah, I talked to a hybrid the other day and they look just like me. Okay, I mean, I get that, I understand that, and they're allowed to believe that. I haven't seen evidence of that. Just because someone can play the piano, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah,
great. It doesn't make you a hybrid. But what we're looking at again with the self-replication of species is that there was a difference between the apparitional image that first appeared to the experiencer. I had a case study in India where now these are genuinely used. Not, I should say genuinely. These are originally called incubi cases. And somebody called me out. Well, you've had case studies that mirror Dr. Carla Turner's. Of course I have, because they're incubi cases. The phenomenon does repetitive methodologies, and many times. Anyways, this individual in India told me that she had been with 7 different men in her life, and that one entity had manifested as each and every one of them. And there's an overwhelming desire to where the experiencer has to believe in the image they're manifesting as. And I can get into that too. I don't want to ramble.
no, yes, but like surely after like the second or third time this being morphed into someone else, she kind of must have copped onto it, like, but it did it seven
Yeah,
times.
seven. Yeah, as seven. Yeah. So what's fascinating though is because it was trying to self-replicate through her, it manifested first as the lovers that were not wearing protection, as to increase the probability of conception.
Yeah,
Yeah, so whatever we're dealing with, again, it tries to create a symbiotic relationship with a lot of the experiencers, to where I'm pulling an image from your mind, I'm stepping into it. You let him do that, you're going to let me because I am him. And I had an experience where I was working with where she was abducted by beings that were appearing as her favorite cartoon characters because she was a kid. And yet there were times when the phenomenon just didn't touch her, left her alone. And so she's growing, she's evolving. And then when it manifested another time, it was the same cartoon character. The only problem is she wasn't watching those cartoons anymore.
yeah,
And so in real time, she said suddenly it was like it was melting down because the eyes started to move. And the only way she could express herself was it felt like it was measuring my belief in the image.
yeah. Okay,
Strange.
so this is when she was older. It was still appearing
Yeah,
as,
correct.
and
And now she's taller. It's crazy.
yeah, and she's noticing that the being is testing her, and
Mhm.
next time it comes back, you're saying it'll probably appear as something else next time.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Which again, it implies that we're not dealing with something that's traversing thousands of light years to test belief.
Hmm.
This is what leads me to believe that this and other case studies where it's like, okay, if these are ET, why are they acting like spirits? Why are people contacting them during seances? Why is
Total
Al?
deception.
I know, right, right.
Total
Thank you, thank you.
deception. They want us to
Absolutely.
think they're godly.
There we
We
go,
want to
brother.
cooperate and do anything they want.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And that's what I've been trying to tell people. But yeah, I mean, to me, and I know it's obvious to you guys too, to me, it should be obvious to researchers. It's like, okay, why is it that Albert Bender's building altars in his attic to contact aliens?
Who
Makes
is
no sense.
who's Albert Bender?
He was one of the very first contactees
Okay.
in ufology. Yeah. So again, he's building altars to talk to extraterrestrials. Why was George Hunt Williamson? I'm getting passionate now, guys, so forgive me. But why was George Hunt Williamson using a Ouija board to contact aliens? It's nonsense, nonsense.
Yeah, and
And
Aleister Crowley. I saw this on
correct.
Reddit recently. He drew a picture of a spirit that he was contacting, and it was a gray alien.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And not just that, and I've been harping on this as of late because I'm passionate about it. But in the 90s, early 90s, the Skull Experiment in England were a group of practitioners, psychics, and then you had parapsychologists who met, had Ouija boards. They sat down because they were trying to contact relatives that were on the other side. In the middle of these seances, the proto-intelligence we're actually dealing with, the one that's hiding behind the masks, that manifested. And
Yeah,
that was the alien gray.
yeah,
So and to me, as a researcher, I would be like, okay, at what point do we start questioning their intentions with us? It's obvious to me, at least.
yeah.
My point, you know, we should do it automatically.
Of course, of
Uh,
course.
all right.
There should be no hesitancy about it.
No, yeah.
I
Just
agree, brother.
in the case of their selection, okay,
Mhm.
does original sin have anything to do with it? Does sin, a generational sin in the family, have anything to do with their selection?
Well, there are certain occult connections. I had an experiencer that reached out to me, said that she was taken in a gas station parking lot. And then when she went back in, like through history, she went to the city hall and realized that that building was built upon grounds to which satanic ritual magic was performed. So there is a connection there. But there are also case studies of people who've done nothing, absolutely nothing, have no knowledge of any of this, and then they're taken and these things occur. But in terms of their victimologies, in antiquity, we would call them generational spirits. And now here's why, because if they took the mother, they would focus then on the daughter or the next generation. Well, we know that to be true now in the UFO abduction phenomenon. So that's just another overlapping thematic element between the two.
Yeah, okay. Uh, can you just explain to me as well, okay, what is a succubus? What is that?
Well, in times past, demonologists hypothesized that it was an intelligence that would appear to a man as a woman. Like I said, usually a lover, an ex-wife, the current wife if she's out of the room. And then the whole purpose would be to seduce them to harvest secretions and excretions from that individual. Then that same intelligence would go to a woman in the image of a man and inseminate her with the seed it took. And so, in times past, like I said, demonologists hypothesized that these were two separate entities. I would suggest that this is not really a who, it's a how. This is a methodology the phenomenon employs. Now, the reason behind that was because, again, to self replicate. It wasn't just to inseminate, there was no purpose, unless they were trying to create a social skin. And I need to say this for everybody that's going to be watching and listening, that possession to us is pregnancy to them.
Okay.
What? Say that again.
Possession to us is pregnancy to them.
Okay.
It is not merely the relocation of consciousness, it's a replication of life. And that's why I suggested earlier that what we're looking at in the hybridization program is not just the insemination of the fetus. Something is commandeering that. And then that's not just witnessed in modernity, that's witnessed in biblical antiquity as well. So again, if these are new intelligences, why are they operating just like the older ones? It's the same thing. And what we're witnessing is it evolving according to our awareness of it, masquerading itself throughout centuries according to different religious traditions. But essentially, what we're looking at, it's primeval, right? It's ancient. It's something that again, evolving according to our awareness of it, and even more than that. The reason it's evolving is because it wants to evade. It doesn't want us to truly know what it's doing.
Okay.
But no, we might revolt.
There we go, brother. There we go.
Right. You keep those people in the dark.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we wouldn't be able to sell t-shirts, right? And have these big conferences about how lovely they are. Couldn't do that.
does Nathaniel, are you finding in your research as well, or in the historical record, whatever text you're looking at, Are they eating us as well?
Well, I can tell you this, the very first succubus encounter recorded by MUFON included beings that assaulted the experiencer and then drank blood out of chalices.
So
Where did they get that blood?
yeah. And
So yes, I do, but I'm sorry, good.
Ted's been saying for a while that they've been drinking our blood. They're eating us.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And that is obviously some of the darker nuances of the phenomenon that if you say that, people go like, you're crazy. You know what I mean?
Oh
But
yeah.
again, for the uninitiated, for the neophytes out there who would suggest that, no, right? For us who actually, especially with Ted, you've experienced that. You've seen the phenomenon face to face. It's irrefutable. But I can tell you this with a surety that even vampirology has a measure of this intelligence, where it was not just harvesting the secretions and excretions just to take them or to self-replicate. It was the ingesting of them that filled them with some kind of power. Right now, today, I should say, right now, today, there are factions of practitioners who are drinking blood. And from that, they're getting some sort of power. But absolutely.
Uh
Well, I want to throw something in, and it's self-replication here. Uh, Now I've seen a little different there, but I'm not disagreeing with you. I certainly don't know everything, but I have seen them take from me and from others semen, eggs from the female, get down over the female and right in her face, appearing as her lover, so she would be grateful for the experience and
Right.
be loved. And then what they did was they went and they created clones out of that
Mhm.
material. Uh,
Absolutely.
it was a replication of the human itself. It had nothing to do with alien
Yes.
program or body fluids from aliens or what have you.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's another pathology that was demonstrated in the Apocrypha of John. It said that they made copies of bodies. We would consider them clones.
Yeah. Okay.
Strange.
Well, what's the difference in a clone and a hybrid?
Well, I would suggest that a hybrid is for them. A clone it could also be another biological avatar to which they could possess. It's just like one of the experiencers Dr. Carla Turner worked with, where she looked over in the corner, there was another her. And
Yes.
they told her, if you do not cooperate, we'll send that version of you back and nobody will know it's not really you.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. So I believe, again, that our ancestors were doing their very best to articulate what they were experiencing. Sometimes they fell short, but what they did give us is some vocabulary, some case studies to where we know, okay, like for instance, Lamashtu, the entity that would descend down upon pregnant women at nighttime, stare into the eyes again, and the women wake up the next day, the baby's gone. What is that? And so they were doing, again, through mythopoeic literature, they would say, okay, these are what we're experiencing, these case studies. We don't know what it is, but thankfully now in modernity, we're starting to look at these bloody footprints in the snow, put them together and say, look, a lot of this sounds like what we're dealing with today.
Mhm. I
Most
saw
definitely.
I saw those 3 or 4 month old fetuses taken from women, human women,
Mhm.
and they were used uh, as you might say a buffet or banquet for the praying mantis. The
Mhm.
Their arms and legs, heads were dismembered, and their chest cavity was split open. And these mantis, I stood there and I watched them feeding on the bodily organs of these little fetuses.
Mhm.
And so it's a feeding program. Basically, in my opinion, and I stand
Mhm.
to be corrected, it all boils down to concealed, manipulative, deceptive feeding
Right.
program for creatures that are non-human that are
Mhm.
feeding on human flesh and blood
It's very, it's,
on all levels.
mhm. Yeah, I agree in the fact that the deception is through and through. I mean, but what I'm looking more towards is like, okay, how much influence do they have over us? Because you've seen it as well, where people will have the worst experience anybody could have. And then 10 years later, like, that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And it's like, who is
Every cloud has
convinced?
a silver lining.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like, who's
And
convincing you of
doesn't
this?
the Bible say that Satan's in charge of this planet?
Oh, I'll tell you what it says is that he changed himself into a being of light. How many
Uh,
times have we heard that, my friend?
yeah, well, that's a lie.
I know, isn't it?
Being
And
in charge.
I'll tell you what's awesome too is not awesome, but I think again it solidifies our foundation. Is when the Collins elite, let me get back into this research. They were a group of physicists. They were a part of the Department of Defense, our federal government. Well, they were in charge of researching any and all interconnectivities between the UFO abduction phenomenon, demonology, and the occult. And so they went to a contemporary of Aleister Crowley. Her name was Sybil Lake. She moved from the United Kingdom to Los Angeles. They sat down with her, and she was what they called a white witch. And they asked her, can you get in contact with the entities that Aleister Crowley was in contact with? So she went into her thing, her session. She's channeling this intelligence. They're interrogating it. And they're asking this being, are you an extraterrestrial? And this entity started laughing them to scorn and said, you idiots, of course we're not ET. We're demons of old. This is just our newest deception.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
it is. Yeah,
Fascinating.
yeah.
Mm.
What's prompted the change though?
In terms of what?
Before, like what that demon was saying, we are demons of old. This is just a deception. And
Who
it's
would believe her?
yeah, no, but I mean the change in whatever this intelligence is. Why did it
Oh,
change?
because I mean, if it's associated with demonology, people fear that. People misunderstand that. Like, obviously, they should, right? That's how I felt when growing up in evangelicalism. But I mean, if you're going to tell people that we're a threat, it's harder to deceive them in the end. It's
Yeah,
far easier, again, to create your own character, one that cannot be vetted. I'm from Zeta Reticuli. Where's the proof? We cannot vet that.
yeah, yeah,
just just them knowing that it exists doesn't prove that they come from Zeta Reticuli. So my point being, it was a way again to incarnate once more, to create another mask. Now, this is some of the research I've been doing as of late, where the reason it's diversified its identity is not just to obfuscate the truth, obviously, but it's also where the mask itself is accompanied by rules that we believe they play by. Just like in the 90s with the skull experiment. Well, okay, that's my deceased brother, Brandon. Brandon's going to do Brandon things until it gets you into a cognitive interface or a scenario where you realize that's not Brandon.
yeah,
And now you're making eye contact with an intelligence that you no longer have rules for.
yeah. Ted, have you found that in your experiences? I mean, you've had these entities appear to you as relatives before.
Well, in Masquerade, we talk about Miss Flowers in that old house where I was staying with Ralph, my friend, and it turned out under hypnosis, I saw that it was a hologram. Miss Flowers wasn't real at all.
Yeah, it,
But I have seen entities that have appeared to me as deceased loved ones.
Mhm.
I have witnessed that. I have seen that, and the Bible says test the spirit, so I
There we
don't
go.
necessarily believe what I see. But if it's a loved one, I don't shut the door. I see what
Right.
they have to share.
It's
Nathaniel,
correct.
can I ask you, you've read Ted's story and you know about Maya, okay?
Mhm.
How does Maya fit into the biblical record? What was her purpose?
In terms of what? Can you be more specific, please?
Well, she appears to Ted. Starts showing him photo albums to
Mhm.
prove to him that he's psychic, okay? And
Mhm.
then she's the one who implants the message to go back to uh
To
Yeah,
Alabama.
to
Alabama.
Yeah.
Um,
mhm.
but we're not. That doesn't sound like not a succubus. What was the other one? The female version
That's the
of
succubus.
the
The female
succubus. Yeah.
version is the succubus. No. Well, I think some of these are initiatory practices. I mean, we have cases where not it's not only that occurs, but to where they'll manifest symbols and act. What do you see? How can you manipulate this? What do you do with this? But in terms of someone or something that is not malevolent, that's just telling them, hey, listen, I need you to go here. I don't know. I know that the reason I say that is because I know that in Dr. Carla Turner's book Taken, at the very end of it, she talks about basically appealing to either God or the universe or something to say, okay, is there anybody out there on our side, right? And she's taken before a panel and they kind of help her along to understand. Number one, yes, there's a scenario here where they want the planet, they want you. So I do believe that is the case. But I don't really know what to think about Maya, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Well, she directed me into a world of metaphysical.
Hmm.
Okay, instead of into a world of Christianity, she
Right.
directed me, into metaphysical beliefs and reincarnation and
Hmm.
all these things and these I've lost my word, but
No, you're right. This again, this is what I was suggesting before, where these seem to be initiatory practices, uh, where in order to get the practitioner initiated, they have to believe in certain things. They have to actually put in effort to do these things. And we've had actual cases, and I won't mention the person, but where one painter in Italy he painted an image of the devil going to a woman, giving her a book, telling her to read the book in an exchange for a Bible. And then that was an initiatory practice to where that entity would then go back to her and mentor her into being a practitioner of magic. We have cases in ufology where that's actually occurred during abductions.
I can see.
So that's strange to me, right? Why be so obvious? I'll tell you why it's obvious. Because again, the new masquerade is the guides, we're the ascended masters, we're everything else but the truth of the matter, which is, again, we are being deceived by a species that is stage managing certain experiences, that is managing the experiencer's perceptions of them, stepping in and out of archetypes. And during the entire time, it's like, okay, why aren't we looking at some of these older case studies?
Yeah,
Maybe that's right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
but it's all in the direction of mass feeding,
Yeah. Wow.
mass feeding, and governmental deception for a little technology that we've been sold out to.
Right. And in the Collins Elite research, they uncovered a faction within our government that was actually, they're 10 minutes away from me at Wright Pat Air Force Base, that were actually performing incantations to conjure these entities, not just that, but hoping that they would pity our species enough to give us technology. To the point, mind you, that there were partial manifestations of metallic objects.
Oh wow.
So, right, that's troubling to me because that's what we want from them. What do they want from us?
Yes. Well, we know what they want.
Well, they're
Right,
getting what
absolutely.
they want.
Mm.
I
Okay.
They're,
believe it. I
they're
believe it.
getting what they want.
So, how far do you have to go back in the Bible to see these beings? Okay, because in there's this idea, okay, and it's that there was a war in heaven, and
Mhm.
two a third of the angels rebelled. Okay, are we
Mhm.
talking about the same story here, but it's just still playing out that the entities that we're dealing with are these third of the angels?
Um, yes, we would have to get into linguistics and define what a fallen angel is. That's those two words are never found in the Holy Writ. That's a concept where the angels fell, fallen angel. What is the definition? Where does the Hebrew word malakuma come from? In the Ugaritic ritual bowls, they were deceased ancestors. which this is how they've appeared to us in the past, right? People that have died, their ancestors. So we don't even know if that's just another mask of theirs. But in terms of the origin, yes. I mean, some of the oldest ritual bowls we've discovered in archaeology is they're written in Ugarit, but they talk about beings that manifested to practitioners after erecting an altar, which the psychopathy here is so self-evident. Worshipped.
Yeah.
It's narcissistic. I want to feed. I want to be feared. And so, matter of fact, my lecture that I gave at the Awakening in the UK is going to be up here soon, Monday. Monday. And so in that lecture, I talk about how that when practitioners built the first altars, specifically within the Levant and in Syria, that's when you have the emergence of the dream demon trying to self-replicate. And you have the implantation of consciousness, carving, like I said before, it's called the ritual of teraphim, carving the name of the unclean spirit into the metal. That did not originate from the primordial mind.
Yeah.
That was not ours. That's them. And so, since the dawn of recorded history, there has been this, sadly enough, this partnership, the symbiotic relationship between a seemingly higher intelligence that's been manipulating our species. And yeah, I mean, we're talking about the early and late Iron Ages.
Well, you say symbiotic, but that would mean we would have to get something in return, but I don't really see like it's more parasitic. It has to be.
Right. Well, yeah, there's yes, the symbiotic nature here is indicated by the way it's co-evolving with us.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And even the demonic hypothesis, like I was telling somebody on the show yesterday, when we're looking at some of the doctrines that the demonic are demonstrating, they're not rooted in biblical antiquity. They're rooted in pop culture. Many of them are developments within Western scholarship. 666. How many times? Okay, the mark of the beast. Well, when you get into 666, I know this because I grew up as a PK, pastor's kid. I've talked to scholars about this. That is gematria. 666 is Greek and Aramaic gematria. That's when you take a word and you assign a numerical value. Well, just so happens 666 and 616 equates to Nero. They knew
Mm.
that when they wrote this. My question is, why is a demon, right, employing that kind of terminology if it knew it didn't exist? It wasn't really what okay, right? It's almost like, again, there's something that's playing certain roles to obfuscate and to deceive.
Um, Ted has often spoken about what different alien programs there are, okay? And uh off the top of the head, we've got the cloning program, uh a hybrid program, but there's also like social programs they employ on Earth as well.
Mhm.
Um, one of them was Ted, you brought it up since we're talking about numbers. It was the 1111. Okay. Do you remember Ted?
Yeah,
1111. Can
I
you
do.
just quickly explain what that was and where it came from?
Okay. Well, back in the, I'm gonna say around 1990, sometime, in the metaphysical world, there was people seeing these. They were giving images of this 1111, and all kind of theories about what it meant. Uh, some travel agencies came up with these groups of the Great Pyramids because if you were there on January the 11th,
Mhm.
you would be taken into a higher uh, dimension, uh, higher level of consciousness. I
Mhm.
also saw a group to the down in South America to Machu Picchu.
Mhm.
Another one, it doesn't matter, it was in Central America somewhere. But anyway, all these different things were going on, but nobody ever really came up with anything outside of theories.
Mhm.
And then, you know, I was on one of the crafts in one of my abductions, and I was taken into this auditorium, and down where like the stage would be, although it really
Mhm.
wasn't a stage, but there were two big Greek-looking columns, so only smaller versions of that, on each side of this stage. And one was the inside columns were just a tiny bit shorter than the outside columns, which made it look like 11 space 11. Okay. So I thought, well, how interesting. Let's see what this is about. And so then they brought in this mass of people, group of people that had come in on some of their ships, brought in, and these people were told if they would run through this empty space between these columns, that they would immediately transcend into heaven and be saved, and all this stuff was presented to them.
That's
And
interesting.
so these people did. And what happened is they rushed forward to go through this. It was a laser type thing, and it disintegrated them instantly when they went through it. It was kind of like reminded me of like a fly in a one of these
Tennis
zapping
racket.
things. Yeah, you hear it
Yeah.
buzz, and then there's nothing but ashes. So that's what I saw, and I thought, dear God, more deception. And there they've got all these souls now entrapped in there in this tube or whatever it is that they're now in. And so there you go.
So this is an example 1111, okay? Now,
Mhm.
people think that if you're receiving angelic messages, 33, okay,
Mhm.
but also 1 1, which is 11, and then
Right.
to 2 and 2, like, but it's just like, is this just another alien program, more
Mm.
deception, because they play into all this numerology stuff? Is that what you think,
Right.
Nathaniel?
I think there's a profound amount of social conditioning present. But what this just demonstrated was they basically professed a series of rules. You do this, this will happen. If you don't do this, this will not happen. And then, just like they've always done, you go to do that thing. And then when you do it, something completely different manifests, something completely different occurs. And this is a symbolic of the larger picture here, where the reason they give us these fake rules is so that, okay, yeah, we'll commit to that, we'll do that. Who wouldn't want to, raise their consciousness? Who wouldn't want to be, seen as a prophet or a mediator or a demigod? And yet, yeah, you follow that rule, something else occurs. And sadly enough, that's what we've been doing as a species. Here are a couple crumbs. Here's the carrot in front of the horse. And then by the time we bite into that, then we realize this is not at all what it alleged to be.
Yeah.
And it's a sad series of events.
Yeah, it really is. Like, I'm kind of like looking at the things on our planet now, and I'm just like, what is real now? All these
Right.
like ancient like traditions we would have, and it seems to always lead back to these guys in one sense or
That
another.
is it's scary. Yes. So in my lecture, I talk about a species of snake as a snake, and is the Iranian spider-tailed viper who co-evolved with its prey. And in an effort to capture its prey, which was primarily birds, they were primarily birds, it created a tail that looked exactly like a spider. And so it realized that in order to capture my prey, I had to appear as something my prey would want to capture.
Yeah, I see.
Right. More than that, if I could go deeper, what occurred was the bird with its nearly microscopic vision is hunting. And so it sees a spider. So it's not just the image that it's manifesting as, right? It's not just the deceased ancestor. Along with the image come rules that we, by nature, apply to the image. Just like the bird, it's a spider. It's going to do spider things,
Yeah.
right? Spider ain't going to fly off. So yeah, it flips its tail back and forth. And then this is what the Collins elite realize, what that is, that there is a profound amount of illusion present where the bird thinks I'm in control. I'm the one that's hunting the spider, not realizing that it's the one being hunted by the snake. And by the time it pounces on that spider, then and only then, right? Go walk into the, between the columns.
Yeah.
This will happen. Then and only then does the proto-intelligence manifest behind it all. Then that bird realizes, I don't have rules for this. I thought I was dealing with a spider. And so there's a reason why it's symbiotic. It's because it's collecting data. It's evolving according to our awareness of it. And so this speaks to the technological advances that Ted was referring to before, where there is technology being employed. In that technology, there is a learning matrix. Whereas we're evolving, it's evolving as well.
And do you know what the end game is? Is it they're going to keep us? See, this is what we're talking about hybrids, me and Ted.
Yeah.
People think hybrids are going to take over. Ted makes the point, then what are they going to eat? If they
Right,
do that,
right. And again, we have people out there, well, if there's such a threat, why wouldn't they kill us all? No. It's like cattle. We're not going to wipe out cattle. We like steaks.
yeah,
Doesn't mean we're not going to go out and slaughter a cow for one.
yeah,
So yeah, I'm
Speaking of
sorry.
cattle, let me tell you a little story.
Okay.
Okay. You've got a big pasture full of cattle,
Mhm.
and you're raising this cattle. It's your food source, but it's becoming more and more difficult to take care of the cattle out there in the pasture in the large fields.
Mhm.
So finally you give the cattle some intelligence so
Mhm.
that it will start to be able to take care of itself.
Mhm.
Darn, that when you did that, the cattle began to wake up a little bit and
Mhm.
suspect its true nature.
Right.
So you create millions of deceptive programs to
There we go.
keep your feed source in the dark so that it won't revolt.
Correct.
Now, this
But
basically is what we're dealing with.
I
yeah.
believe that the diversification it employs it needs to be paid attention to. Like people need to have the conversation we're having right now
They need
because
to do it.
I believe it's absolutely why it's allowed us and even influenced people to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
Because, and I've long stressed this, if you have an incubi victim talk to an experiencer of UFO abduction and they start comparing notes, the mask is pulled off. It's like Dr. Carlos Turner said, you're seeing angels. You need to pull off the mask because then and only then will they realize, wait a minute, why have we been calling these fields completely different names? It's the same methodology. It's the same phenomenon. But you're right, and I believe that's one of the ways it is incarnated throughout history. It's evolving, and it's evolving in order to evade.
And is there any defense for this? If someone wants the experience to stop without
Mhm.
mutilating themselves, how do they do it?
I'm I'm on the fence right now. I'm semi-convinced that amulets have an effect. That's just where I'm at personally. What I have witnessed and others, my colleagues, have witnessed more often is that iron has been employed. Now, the very first mention of that again was in ritual bowls where Lamashtu would come down, stare into the eyes of the pregnant mother, and it happened so repeatedly. It was repetitive throughout history to the point where these experiencers were taking necklaces out of iron and trying to replicate a face so that when they're asleep, the entity itself would focus on the wrong face, thereby the next day they still have the baby within them. But that was made out of iron. So I have suggested, and I do suggest iron, but in terms of amulets, only because of the way I've seen them use that against us, I'm still on the fence about
That
What
work the same way as holy water.
the which with respect to the iron or the amulets.
Either one.
Yeah,
They're
well, I
both
have
they're both objects. Uh,
yeah,
and you're using them to save yourself or
right.
protect yourself. So wouldn't that be the same
does
difference?
does holy water work
Yes.
though?
There I know of a case where they set holy water down in the middle of a room where the entity was. And the priest himself watched as that intelligence began to siphon the holy water down till there was nothing left in the vial.
So no effect.
Sometimes it's even made it worse. So that's why it's like, that's a very tough question, because if I suggest something that doesn't work, who are they going to come back to?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And it's a struggle. But that's why I'm like,
What works for one person may not work for another.
uh,
You
there
know,
we go. Absolutely.
it depends on what influences you're getting that you're not aware of.
Okay,
Right.
so when you talk about these amulets, do you mean like you would draw an image of the cross on yourself?
Or yeah, Hail Marys. Yeah.
Prayer.
The prayer is right. And just Stars of David, crosses, some of that works until it doesn't. And at this point right now in my career, I'm questioning as to why it sometimes doesn't work. As of late, people have told me, well, that individual didn't have enough faith. Well, how do they know that?
Yeah.
It's weird.
Did you ever listen to Father Malachi Martin?
Yes.
Yeah,
Where is it at? I have Hostage to the Devil.
yeah. Great
Ta-da!
book. Great book.
And I have a first edition of Windswept House.
Yeah. Uh so do you remember he was talking about people who um have an entity in the family and then
Mhm.
they give the children to the entity when they pass away.
Yeah.
It's like this generational possession, you could say.
And they will demand that.
Yeah.
Deborah Moffat had that happen, where the entity manifested drawing with soap on the mirror. I want a ritual blood sacrifice.
And she did it for it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And
That's
she's like, well, what do you mean? He names the woman. This is who I want. Why? She was promised to me.
yeah. But could that be why some as why like for instance iron or the cross might work
Mhm.
on someone but not on another person because it's like a contractual agreement that was made
I
generations
don't
ago.
know. It's possible. My mind, whenever this question is asked, my mind goes back to Father Sinistrari of Amino. He was a Franciscan priest, and he was primarily dealing with incubi cases. And during this time in his life, I mean, he was having experiencers who were being assaulted by these beings, and these beings were carving their amulets and symbols underneath their eyelids so that when they went to bed at night, not knowing what's going on, they close their eyes and it's crazy stuff, really wild
Oh
stuff. But
God.
anyways, it was during these case studies, he had one experiencer who died, and the family had contracted them to come and do an autopsy, kind of look at the body and inspect the body. He's there with the physicians, and yeah, they realized that number one, there were amulets carved in her eyes, but also that there were entities that they were encountering that would not respond at all to anything religious. And this occurred when Father Sinistrari was on a dirt road coming back from one of those investigations. In his writings, he talks about how an entity walked out and looked at him in the middle of the path, and he said, "I employed everything I had." And the entity did not respond whatsoever. So, in my research, what that implied, at least to me, was that there are some times where we interact with the mask.
Yeah.
Right? Remember what I told you, where the bird looks at the spider? Oh, well, this is going to work on the spider. But there are fleeting moments when the proto intelligence itself makes eye contact with us. And then we realize all of these rules I thought they followed, they no longer allegedly follow. And so that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah. It's hard to nail down a defense when the defense that you think you know is actually a trick. I see.
Well, yeah, or it was a part of propaganda.
Yeah.
Or even worse, I got that off of a TV show. And I thought that would work. I had another
Silver
case like
bullets.
that. Yeah. Oh my God. No wonder it didn't work.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, so I'm looking at the various incarnations of this intelligence, wondering why sometimes, our methodologies simply fail. Why is that the case?
Hmm. All right, and final question, okay?
Okay.
Does have you found that calling on the name of Jesus Christ helps?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Uh, in terms of exorcisms, the most powerful exorcist I've ever personally met was a guy named Jonathan Suber. And I mean, you're talking about a guy who would pray 3 or 4 hours a day and fast. And so he ascended, man. I mean, he a
Yeah.
bad dude. And so, but that does lend credibility to the idea where some, and this is going to sound controversial because I just said, I don't know why sometimes it works for others. But this individual, yeah, he wouldn't have to do holy water. It was crazy. So there are individuals who have that ability. Um, but in terms of, again, demonology, and this, I'm saying this is a demonology, I'm starting to question some things, right? Like, what is actually going on here? And why is it that the demonic mask itself is evolving with our scholarship and it's not holding true to what actually occurred? That, to me, that implies that yes, it's malevolent, but it's more like a program that has a learning matrix to where it's constantly trying to navigate around our senses to the point that experiencers are often blinded by what they see.
Right. That was a great talk. That's fantastic. I feel like you've really opened my eyes to what is really going on in this in the abduction field. All right. Nathaniel, I want to thank you for coming on and having this conversation with us today. Me and Ted really appreciate it.
Yes, we
Thank
do.
you.
It was very good, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on. I'm a huge fan of you, Ted, and just meeting you, Stuart, was awesome too. Thank you so much for having me on, guys. Now I have talked to, I've talked to the Ted Rice. I love it, brother. I love it. So thank you so much for having me on, and you guys have a blessed weekend.
Yeah. All right.
You too
Uh,
as well.
till the next
All
time,
right.
listeners.